In 1965, a retired American man woke at 6 in the morning, brewed black coffee, then walked 3 kilometers to the neighborhood grocery store. Back then, the rate of high blood pressure among Americans was roughly half of what it is today, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Today, more than 122 million Americans are living with high blood pressure, more than the combined population of California, Texas, and Florida. The strange thing is that the man of 1965 lived almost unaware of a condition that is now silently damaging the hearts of millions of Americans every single day. Why did this happen? Why is the generation that walks less and eats more processed food now suffering far more from the condition that kills more Americans than any other? The answer lives inside an aging body in ways that science has only recently begun to truly understand. Let's start with an ordinary morning and with the thing you think you understand best about your own heart. Your heart beats approximately 100,000 times every single day, without requiring you to think about it even for a single second. Each beat pushes blood through tens of thousands of kilometers of blood vessels, a network more intricate than any highway system ever built by human hands. But to do that, the heart needs pressure, enough pressure to push blood up to the brain, down to the feet, and out to every fingertip. That pressure, the force of blood pushing against the artery walls, is your blood pressure. The 2 numbers your doctor measures at every single checkup. The top number is the pressure when your heart contracts. The bottom number is the pressure during the resting moment between each beat. And in a healthy body, both of those numbers stay within a delicate balance that the body regulates automatically every single second of every day. But after age 50, the body begins changing in ways that most people do not notice until it is already far too late to ignore. The artery walls gradually lose their elasticity, much like a rubber garden hose left out in the sun for too many years, until it can no longer flex the way it once did. When arteries become stiffer, the heart must work harder to push the same amount of blood through the system, and blood pressure begins to climb steadily upward. This is the threshold that in 1965, very few American physicians fully understood, and almost no patient had ever been told about. In 1965, the average retired American man walked approximately 7,000 steps per day simply through the routines of daily life, not through intentional exercise. Meals were mostly meat, potatoes, and vegetables, cooked at home, not packaged foods containing thousands of milligrams of hidden sodium in a single serving. The average American in 1965 consumed approximately 25 kilograms of added sugar per year, less than half the amount the average American consumes today. Consider this. Each extra kilogram of sugar does not simply go to your waistline. It travels directly into the artery walls through a chronic inflammatory mechanism that science only confirmed in the past decade. This is one of the reasons why Americans today are in many ways eating more carefully, less saturated fat, far less smoking, and yet high blood pressure is more widespread than it has ever been. The man of 1965 smoked more. That much is undeniable. 42% of American adults smoked at that time, compared to roughly 11% today. But he walked more than you do, consumed less sodium than you do, slept without interruption from a phone screen, and never sat motionless for 8 straight hours in front of a monitor. Today, the average American takes only around 3,000 to 4,000 steps per day, less than half the physical activity level the body needs to maintain cardiovascular health as it ages. For an aging heart, that difference is not simply a matter of fitness. It is the difference in how stiff your arteries become, how high your blood pressure climbs during sleep, and how real your stroke risk becomes over the next 20 years. Now, let's go inside and see what actually happens when blood pressure begins to rise, not in a sudden spike, but quietly, incrementally, over the course of many years. The layer of cells lining the inside of every artery, known as the endothelium, thinner than a single human hair, acts as the first line of defense, protecting the entire cardiovascular system. When blood pressure remains chronically elevated, that delicate endothelial layer begins to sustain microscopic damage, like hairline fractures forming across a sheet of glass that looks perfect from a distance. This is the most critical moment in the entire disease process. Those injuries are invisible to any standard diagnostic device, but the body has already begun responding to them. The body recognizes those damaged sites as places needing repair and begins sending LDL cholesterol, the molecules most people only know as bad cholesterol, to accumulate at every injury site. But when that LDL becomes oxidized beneath the endothelial layer, the immune system identifies it as a foreign substance and launches an inflammatory response, sending white blood cells to surround it. Those immune cells swallow the LDL, swell with the lipid material, and eventually die in place, leaving a fatty core embedded inside the artery wall. That is the first atherosclerotic plaque forming. Consider what happens when a system that was only meant to repair a small crack keeps receiving new damage day after day, year after year, for decades on end, without ever fully healing. According to the Framingham Heart Study, the longest continuously running cardiovascular study in the world, tracking participants since 1948, the process of atherosclerosis begins in the 20s in most Americans. By age 60, most Americans have some degree of arterial plaque in their vessels, even if they feel completely healthy and have no symptoms whatsoever. This is where modern medicine fundamentally changed our understanding. High blood pressure causes no pain, creates no obvious symptoms, and produces no warning signs that you can feel. That is why high blood pressure earned the name the silent killer in medical literature, a label first used officially in the American medical journal literature during the 1970s. While you are reading your morning email, taking a sip of coffee, or telling yourself you are fine because nothing hurts, the blood vessels in your brain may be sustaining twice the safe level of pressure. According to the American Heart Association, nearly half of all people with high blood pressure are unaware they have the condition, precisely because there is nothing to feel. And older Black Americans are significantly more affected, with rates of high blood pressure higher than nearly any other population group in the world, according to the CDC. Now, follow what happens when blood pressure goes uncontrolled, not just for weeks or months, but for years of continuous, unrelenting, elevated pressure. The heart must work harder to push blood through increasingly stiff vessels, and the heart muscle begins to thicken in response, just as any muscle would when forced to work beyond its intended capacity. But unlike a leg muscle that grows stronger through exercise, a heart muscle that thickens because of high blood pressure actually becomes less flexible, pumps less efficiently, and becomes far more prone to dangerous rhythm disturbances. And at the same time, the kidneys, the organs responsible for filtering blood and regulating blood pressure, begin to suffer damage from the very pressure they are trying to control. This is no longer a single organ problem. As the kidneys weaken, they retain more salt and fluid in the body, which raises blood pressure further, creating a cycle with no natural stopping point. In the brain, tiny arteries sustaining constant pressure begin to harden and narrow, reducing blood flow to the regions responsible for memory and cognitive function over time. Recent research from the National Institutes of Health shows that uncontrolled high blood pressure during the ages of 55 to 65 is one of the strongest known risk factors for dementia. For the millions of older Americans sitting alone in a clinic waiting room with a test result in hand, the numbers on that paper are not just data. They are a question about the years that remain. Return to the man of 1965. He did not monitor his blood pressure regularly because his family doctor only checked it once a year if he came in for a visit. And not everyone did. Today, automated blood pressure monitors sit in every American chain pharmacy, every fitness center, and even on the wrists of millions of people through their smartwatches. But the ability to measure is not the same as measuring correctly, at the right time of day, in the right position, and understanding what those numbers actually mean in your specific context. Studies show that up to 40% of people diagnosed with high blood pressure in a clinic actually have normal blood pressure at home, a phenomenon known as white coat hypertension. But the reverse is equally true. Many people with normal clinic readings have dangerously elevated blood pressure at night during sleep, a condition that only a 24-hour monitoring device can detect. During sleep, the blood pressure of a healthy person drops by 10 to 20%, what scientists call nocturnal dipping. And this is the single most important window of cardiovascular recovery. Older adults with high blood pressure often lose this nighttime pressure drop entirely, meaning their hearts and blood vessels never truly rest, even during the deepest sleep. Consider this comparison. Your heart has pumped enough blood to fill more than 30 Olympic-sized swimming pools in the past year alone, and it did all of that without requiring a single conscious thought from you. Now imagine all of that pumping work being done at twice the recommended pressure, year after year, without pause and without any external sign that anything is wrong. The single most powerful risk factor, specific to older Americans, is not any ingredient or family history, but the combination of hidden sodium in processed foods and the sharp drop in physical activity that follows retirement. The average American consumes 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day, nearly 1.5 times the 2,300 milligram limit that the American Heart Association recommends for adults over 50. More troubling still, 70% of that sodium does not come from salt you add at the table, but from sodium already hidden inside packaged food before you ever open the package. And unlike the man of 1965, whose walk to the grocery store naturally helped his body process excess sodium through perspiration and muscle demand, today's retired American drives to that same store. This is the greatest paradox of modern preventive medicine. We know more than ever before about disease mechanisms, but lifestyle is eroding cardiovascular health faster than medical knowledge can compensate. Now, the consequences. When high blood pressure goes undetected or inadequately managed for years, the body begins to pay a price in specific, measurable ways. Stroke is the most direct consequence of uncontrolled high blood pressure. It is the leading cause of permanent disability among Americans over 65. According to the CDC, in 2023, every year, nearly 800,000 Americans suffer a stroke, more than the entire population of a mid-sized American state capital, and nearly 3/4 of those are first-time events. And when a 67-year-old experiences a major stroke, the probability of permanently losing full independence is approximately 1 in 3, according to data from Mayo Clinic. Congestive heart failure, the condition in which the heart can no longer pump enough blood to meet the body's needs, affects over 6 million Americans, and high blood pressure is the leading contributing cause in the majority of cases, according to the American Heart Association. Financially, the cost of treating cardiovascular disease in the United States exceeds $216 billion per year, larger than the entire annual GDP of many mid-sized nations combined. For a retired American living on Medicare, the out-of-pocket costs from complications caused by uncontrolled high blood pressure can reach tens of thousands of dollars per year, far exceeding what most retirement plans anticipated. And beyond the dollar cost is the thing no hospital bill can ever quantify: the ability to live independently, to move freely, and to remember the names of the people you love most. Yet this is also where the story can change direction, because no chronic disease has more compelling scientific evidence for prevention and management than high blood pressure. The SPRINT trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2015, stands as one of the most important clinical trials of the past decade, specifically on blood pressure management. That trial followed more than 9,000 adults with high blood pressure and found that controlling blood pressure below 120 to reduce the risk of major cardiovascular events by nearly 25%. The lifestyle changes with the strongest evidence base are not elaborate or expensive. They are straightforward and have been studied for decades, starting with exactly what the man of 1965 did, naturally without thinking. According to the American Heart Association, brisk walking for 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week, can reduce systolic blood pressure by 4 to 9 millimeters of mercury, a reduction comparable to certain older generation blood pressure medications. The DASH diet, developed with funding from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, was designed specifically for older adults with high blood pressure and showed significant blood pressure reductions in controlled clinical trials. When lifestyle changes are insufficient, and in many older adults, they often are not enough alone, the classes of blood pressure medications have become among the most thoroughly studied medical interventions in the history of modern medicine. What matters is understanding that a physician will choose the appropriate medication class based on your accompanying conditions, your age, and your individual response, because no single protocol fits every patient's situation. Home blood pressure monitoring, following American Heart Association guidelines, means measuring twice in the morning and twice in the evening for at least 1 week, creating a far more accurate picture than any single clinic reading. The greatest advance in this field over the past decade is not a new drug, but the recognition that blood pressure must be evaluated as a dynamic vital sign over time, not as a static number from a single measurement. Blood pressure measurement technology itself is evolving rapidly. Clinically validated wearable devices can now continuously monitor blood pressure over 24 hours without any cuff at all. Research from Harvard Medical School and the Harvard School of Public Health shows that people who monitor blood pressure at home regularly and share that data with their physician have significantly better blood pressure control rates. Stress management also has increasingly strong evidence. Slow breathing techniques and relaxation methods have been shown in randomized controlled trials to reduce systolic blood pressure by an average of 3 to 5 millimeters of mercury. The man of 1965 did not know any of this, not because he was uninformed, but because the science did not yet have the data to tell him. You are not living in 1965. You are reading from 60 years of research that the man of that morning never had access to. The greatest difference between that man and you is not biology or genetics, but the information and the choices you can bring to your next doctor's appointment. The questions you can ask your physician are not general ones, but very specific ones. How has my blood pressure trended over the past 2 years? Not compared to a single reading, but as a pattern over time. You can ask, has my nighttime blood pressure ever been evaluated? Because many people have dangerous hypertension only during sleep that a clinic visit will never reveal. You can ask, based on my blood pressure history and medical background, what should my specific target range be, and how do we track progress toward it over time? Advances in cardiac imaging, particularly non-invasive CT, coronary angiography, and echocardiography, now allow detection of cardiovascular damage far earlier than at any previous point in medical history. Polypharmacy, the use of multiple medications simultaneously, is the reality for many older Americans and can affect how blood pressure medications interact with other drugs, which is why a complete medication list always needs physician review. Research on the link between high blood pressure and dementia risk is one of the fastest growing areas of clinical neurology, with the latest NIH data showing an increasingly clear causal relationship rather than mere association. Artificial intelligence applications being developed at several American academic medical centers can now analyze blood pressure pattern data over time and flag individuals at high risk of cardiovascular events months before traditional clinical indicators would show concern. The man of that early 1965 morning, walking along the sidewalk to the grocery store, was inadvertently doing one of the single most effective things that modern medicine has spent 60 years of research proving. He did not need to know about the endothelium, about inflammatory cascades, or about the Framingham Heart Study to do it. He simply had no car, and the store was 3 blocks away. In many American suburbs built after the 1970s, that corner grocery 3 blocks away was replaced by a warehouse superstore 3 kilometers from home, with no sidewalk connecting them. That is not a personal failure of any individual. It is a structural change in the built environment surrounding our aging bodies, a change that American public health is increasingly acknowledging has direct cardiovascular consequences. And within that context, the bigger question begins to form. Not how do I treat high blood pressure, but rather, how do I recreate, within my own daily life, some of the physical conditions that the man of 1965 lived within naturally? It might mean parking at the far end of the lot instead of the front space, walking to the mailbox instead of driving past it, or replacing 1 packaged meal per week with something prepared at home. No single one of those changes equals a medication, but evidence from decades of research shows they accumulate in what the science calls the cumulative effect, a total that is significantly greater than any of the individual parts. And at 60 or 70, the years ahead matter more, not less. What matters most is not the years you may have missed, but that you now have enough information to begin today with the smallest steps that science has actually proven to work. On that early morning of 1965, that man had no idea he was protecting his heart. He was just going to get groceries. Today, 122 million Americans are living with high blood pressure, and nearly half of them do not know they have it. That number does not change because you just watched this video. But what can change is the question you bring to your doctor at the next appointment, and perhaps where you park your car tomorrow morning. In 2024, the American Heart Association reported that for the first time in history, the rate of successful blood pressure control among American adults is declining after decades of continuous improvement. Part of the reason is that the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted routine healthcare for millions of Americans, causing many people to abandon blood pressure monitoring for months or even years at a time. That means an entire generation of Americans is now entering their 60s and 70s with years of inadequately monitored blood pressure during the most critical preventive window of their lives. And for those now over 65, looking at an active life still ahead of them, what is at stake is not abstract. They are the decades that can be lived actively, the faces of family members remembered clearly, the staircase climbed without stopping, the drive to visit children made without needing anyone's help. The man of that early morning in 1965 did not have a choice about what information was available to him. You do.